house you see behind me is my family home. We moved into this house when I was 4 years old, back in 1964. Back then, this house was way out, as my mother said, in the sticks. This is in Brookhaven, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember my mother was very upset at my dad, who worked down in what is now Midtown Atlanta, because it was going to take him 20 minutes to get to work. And these days, that's a 45-minute good hard drive at best. So yeah, Atlanta's kind of grown up and around this place and moved on out quite a few miles beyond here. But both my parents have passed away, and we are selling this house now. By the time you see this house will be sold, and in a few days, or at most a few weeks, it will be torn down. This house was built in 1954. This property originally was Camp Gordon, which was a World War I and World War II Army training camp. And as a matter of fact, across the street there's a little ravine with a creek running through it that I played in as a little boy. And we would still find, barbed wire and trenches and bunkers and things like that down there. And it was a wonderful adventure for a kid that's playing Army on an actual Army ground. And I had a great upbringing here, and this, like I said, was my family home. It's got a lot of memories. It's just odd knowing that this is the last time I will sit on this stoop. And it is something that I guess in the back of your mind is coming someday. You know that this day will come. And for me, it's here. And I'm kind of feeling odd about it. Yet knowing at the same time that everything is so temporary. Nothing is permanent. Nothing at all is permanent. Not a life, not a building, not a situation, not a job, not anything. That Christ himself talked about this and said that everything is temporary, and everything said is rust and moths, and the things that we put together and we try to hold on to are things that we don't need to hold on to sometimes. And this house is a great metaphor for that. My mother thought it was a mansion. My mother talked a lot about it being a mansion. She said she would never leave this place, and she didn't. She passed away in this house, directly behind where I'm sitting. And though she had grown up sort of kind of in the church, and she knew a lot of church stories, she knew a little bit about the Bible, she thought this was a mansion. She thought this was a mansion maybe that Christ was talking about. She'd grown up in epic poverty. Grew up in dirt-floored homes, grew up working at one point as a sharecropper, picking cotton when she was a little girl. Matter of fact, towards the end of her life, her mind was, starting to go a little bit, and she was terribly afraid one day that they were going to make her go back out and pick cotton again, because so often, we go back to those kind of terrible things in our life and in our deluded states. And but she looked upon this house, a very simple 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath ranch house that was built by a developer after World War II, and all the houses originally in this neighborhood were identical. They had the same basic floor plan, and all of them are on about a 1/3 acre of land. It was very nice, very roomy, very just pleasant suburban post-World War II America. And to her, this was just a mansion in heaven. This was as good as it ever got. And in some ways, it was. In some ways, compared to where she had come through and what the things she had gone through, that it pretty much was a mansion. But like I said, everything is temporary. Everything. And where do we find in the Bible things that talk about temporary natures of things best? Possibly, when you look back in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, and this is a passage that so many are very, very familiar with. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. There is an occasion for everything, and a time for every activity under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing, a time to search and a time to count as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. My mother's time was from 1932 to earlier this year in 2019. She had her time on earth, and she really loved this house. She really loved her family. Again, it's very temporary, and towards the end of her life she talked about that, and she knew that it was going to be very temporary. And she knew also in her rational times that what she had here was in some ways a reward for making it through the bad times in her life. She wasn't dying in a dirt-floored shack in Alabama outside of a cotton field. She had lived through that. She had made it through that. She had had her time doing that. And perhaps the best secular lesson that we can take from this, and from listening to people like my mom talking about what they've been through, and thinking about our own experiences and all the things we've been through and all the things we've experienced and lived through to tell the tale, whether the tale is embellished or not, or the tale is not told because it's just simply so awful, is that we've made it through it. I heard a saying, or I think I saw a bumper sticker or something one time that said, if you're going through hell, keep on going. Don't stand there and look around saying, wow, this is awful, this is terrible. Just keep on trucking, keep on doing what you're doing and get through it. Because this will also end. This too shall pass. There's only a time for everything. And as we closer and closer embrace Christ, as we closer and closer look to His Word, as we think about what He's trying to tell us, that goes for the good times as well. Enjoy them, but know that this is temporary. You don't go to a party and say, well, I'm going to stay at a party the rest of my life. That's kind of silly. And equally, you don't go to a bad call, something like epically awful, where just everything's going wrong and places on fire and people are screaming and stabbing each other and carrying on, and think, wow, this is the rest of my life right here. But in effect, sometimes we do that. We get in a depressed state. Depression is something that all of us are prone to, in this field especially, in this profession, law enforcement, firefighting, and EMS, because we see so many bad things and it afflicts us so deeply. Yet we're not here for life. We're just passing through. And in the scope of things, in the major scope of things, this is the blink of an eye. I think about the time I've had with my wife, and I think about, again, last week I used a John Hartford song to introduce the message I had for last week, and another John Hartford song comes up, I Wish We Had Our Time Again. I was thinking about that last night. My wife and I are well over 60, both of us, and we know we have fewer years ahead of us than we have behind us, and you know, in some ways I'm a little wistful. I wish we had our time again. Well, I love her dearly. We've been married 36 years, and some of those years were kind of rough, and a lot of those experiences were kind of rough, and I wish we had not done some of the things we did that made them rough, but we did. But we have such a great relationship now, and it just seems like the minutes I spend with her are just passing in moments. They're just fleeting little moments, and the time I'm spending doing things I don't want to do, say at work or wherever, just seems to drag on and on and on. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But Christ talks a lot about this. Christ talks about that we need to have the future in mind at all times. That don't get bogged down in the present. Don't get so wrapped up in what's going on now and thinking this is never going to end. We're doomed. You know, this is never going to work. You know, we're all that. Everything passes. Everything ends, good, bad, and otherwise. And new things come all the time to the end of our lives. And even at the end of our lives, we have something so fantastic to look forward to. It is unreal. Like I said, my mother thought this place was a mansion. Christ talked about what mansions truly are. He talked about this specifically in John 14, 1 through 3. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If not, I would have told you. I'm going away to prepare a place for you. If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am going, you may be also. He has a mansion for us in heaven. And if you start digging around and you look at the language, he's really using the word for room, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. He has a place for us, and it's something right now I don't think anybody can truly imagine. But he has a place for us to come to with him forever, if you want to be there. That's the key, if you want to be there. My mother wanted to be in this house. My mother wanted to be in this house so badly that she told us she would never leave. You know, she was having some trouble towards the end of her life, cognitive trouble and some physical trouble, and we were trying to start laying the groundwork. Okay, Mom, it's time to start thinking about a personal care home. You know, no. She was very adamant about this. This is my mansion. I want to stay here. This is where she wants to stay. Christ is the same way. He is not going to impose himself on you or me or anybody. You have to want to be with him. I think that's where a lot of people get real messed up about Christianity. Well, why does he condemn people to hell? I don't believe in him because I don't think a loving God would do, fill in the blank. But a lot of the time is condemn anybody to hell. He doesn't condemn anybody to hell. We condemn ourselves. Because what heaven is a place we want to go. And to be next to God is a place we want to be with all of our being. That's it. That's the bottom line. We're not asking him, give me a place in heaven, but I don't want to see you. I don't even believe in you. I don't like you. I don't like the way you live. I don't like the way you do. I don't like anything you do. I think you're wrong. You're an evil God. So why in the world would he, as a loving God, a truly loving God, say, okay, well, I'm going to make you be next to me? No. He is responding to your desires. Christ said, as I keep repeating in all these messages, I will give you the desires of your heart. What are your desires? Are your desires to be with Christ? Or are your desires to be somewhere else? When I die, I want to go to hell and be with all my friends. Well, how do you know that Satan's going to let you be with all your friends, number one? Number two, it's flippant. And, flippancy has its place. We don't have to be serious all the time, but when we have a serious discussion about this, let's be serious about it. Do you really love God? Do you? Do you want to be with him? Well, he knows. He knows you. He knows me. He knows the very number of hairs on your head. He knows the very number of grains of sand in the universe, because he built it all. And he's a gentleman. In the old Southern parlance, he's not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. He's not going to force you to be with him if you do not want to be there. So if you're in heaven, it's because you want to be. If you're in hell, it's because you didn't want to be next to him. And that brings up a question. What is hell? What is heaven? Kind of a short answer, kind of a thumbnail answer is heaven is a place where God is. Hell is a place where God is not. They are physical places. Scripture makes that very clear, but let's not dive too deep into that right now. Let's just talk about this on the surface a little bit. Here's the thing. God reigns in heaven. It's very clear that there's a physical place that you go to and you can be next to him. And this, if you really love him, you want to be with him, that's the most wonderful place you can think of. If you really hate him in your heart, if you blame him for everything and have no love for God in your heart, why in the world would he force you to be with him? Hell, on the other hand, is interesting. Let me tell you a little story. Some years ago, my wife, whom I dearly love, got sick, and she was really sick with something, and we went through all this testing, and we went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and what's wrong with her? I don't know. Let's send her to the specialist. And she was sick, and it was just kind of like, okay, we're medical professionals. We know this happens. We know eventually, probably something will be found out. And And finally, they figured out it was something to do with her kidneys. So we were sent to the one guy in Atlanta who was supposed to be like one of the big national specialists with this particular condition she had. Turns out he had run 3 cases before. And I remember getting really nervous when a real distinguished looking guy, just good guy, you could tell, and had, kind you just sort of instantly trust when you meet him. So that was no problem with that. And we're out there staying in the hallway, and he's looking at all the scans, and he tapped something on her scan. He said, "You see that right there?" And we go, "Yeah." He said, "I don't know what that is." We're like, "Okay, this guy's the specialist." Okay, now we're starting to get a little afraid. And long story short, he determined she had this particular condition and said, "I'm very sorry to tell you this, but you need to get your affairs in order. She probably has around 6 months." Well, okay. Went back home and kind of walked through that together. And sometime later, I was thinking about that. Actually, I was away from her. I was at work, and it really just slammed into me that in a few months, she was going to be gone. She was not going to be here. And I got very upset about this. It's like, how can I go on at that point? Not in a depressive, suicidal way, but simply just, she is so integrated into my life, so ingrained in everything I do, everything I think. How am I going to go and do anything without her? And it just occurred to me, that's what hell is. Is hell defined in my definition, in Paramedic John's definition, is the permanent and irrevocable absence from the one thing that you love most of all above everything else. And that's what hell is. I kept thinking, I said, there's literally nothing that could happen to me that would be worse than that. Lake of fire, who cares? Being poked by demons forever, who cares? Being apart from my wife, that's unendurable. I don't know how I could do that. We are so very close. And that led to a real interesting thought about this. There's a section in Revelation called the White Throne Judgment, and we'll be talking more about Revelation much, much later. All the scary book of the Bible, all the revelation of John. We'll be talking more about that later. The revelation of Jesus Christ, written by John, excuse me. And in there, there's a section he talks about, and this comes towards the end. It's called the White Throne Judgment. And you may have heard the term, every knee will bow and every lip will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And this is from where that is in there. And what it is all the heavens and all the earth are just simply disappear. I mean, they're gone. There's nothingness. And there's this literal great white throne. And there sits Jesus Christ as our judge. And we are all before him. All of us, living and dead, are before him. Everybody who's ever existed. And the books are thrown open. You may have heard back when you were in elementary school, well, that's going to go on your permanent record. Well, yeah, there is a permanent record. It's the book of life in heaven. And everything you've ever thought, everything that's ever passed through your lips, everything you've done is all written there. And that's a really scary thought, especially for me. And that you're going through this, and then are you measuring up to the goodness? Could you possibly even exist in the presence of a perfect and holy God? Well, none of us can. None of us can. Nobody. There is only one perfect person who's ever walked the face of this earth, and that was Jesus Christ. All the rest of us don't even begin to measure up. But then, here's the point. Here's 2 things. The Lamb's Book of Life is open, and that is all the people who have confessed this to Christ and given their life over to him, and he has forgiven them from all of this. He paid the penalty for all of the things we did. He paid all of it. Jesus paid it all. And we know we're going to be able to be with him because we're pure enough, we're purified enough. Our sins and all the dross in our life is just swept away by his sacrifice, not ours. And in doing so, he's made us perfect and pure at that moment. And we can exist in his presence, and that's what he wants. But everybody's going to stand before him. And at that moment, here's the kicker. At that moment, everybody realizes this is what they want most in life. This is the person, the thing, whatever that they love more than anything else is Jesus Christ. And it's that moment they realized this, and yet they rejected him. And can you imagine knowing in that moment, that awful moment when there is nothing around you, you are literally naked before God. There is nothing around you. And you realize in that moment, I rejected the thing that loved me the most. The perfect one who loved me perfectly and simply wanted me to love them back. That's all. And I said, nope, not going to do that. No, I hate you. You can go away. I want to go to hell with my friends. Okay. I will give you the desires of your heart. And that to me is what hell is. There's literally nothing that could happen there in my mind that would be worse than that knowledge that you had for one grasping moment right there. You knew as your knee hit the floor and your lips confessed Jesus Christ. This is the one thing you love more than anything else in the world, and it is gone forever. It's overwhelming to think about. The things we do have an eternal significance. The things that we do have a cosmic significance. You know, you think about the books of life and how they're flung open and how everything we do and say is written down there, and we're being paid attention to. We're not forgotten. We're not by ourselves. We're not alone. We're being paid attention to. And it's not from a big brother's watching you kind of thing. It's a loving God who wants you and is reaching out to you every minute of every day. I sit here and think about this house that was my mother's house and how much she loved it. And the way she passed away was very quick. She probably didn't have any conscious thought as she passed away. But I like to think that she had come to Christ. I like to think that she had confessed Him and that we'll see each other again one day. But I wonder in her last hours as she thought about this house and how she had this and how she had this mansion. And the thing that she wanted the most in the world, which was a home and a family, a stable one. Her family had gone through a tremendous amount of tragedy when she was a young girl. And she got what she wanted. She had a stable family. And she had a good home and a good place. This was the desire of her heart. My desire is to be with Christ. My desire is to stay forever in His presence. I love Him that much. The love I have for my wife, which is overwhelming, and to the point where I know at some point she's going to pass away, and I just can't even think about that. My love for God exceeds that. And this is what Christ is talking about. At another point in Scripture, Christ tells an allegorical story about the wealthy man who comes to Him and says, "Teacher, I have learned from you. I have done everything you said. What more must I do to be with you?" And He replies, He knows him. You know, He made him. He knows him. He said, He looks at him. He says, "Give away all your wealth. Give away all your possessions." Not because He was really talking about wealth and possessions. That's not what was really the point. The point was that this is what kept him away from God, and God wants to be with him. Why let anything else bother him? So this is what was going on. Just like this house, everything you have will be gone one day. Rust and moths and corruption and whatever will destroy everything physical you have. The only thing you have is eternal in Jesus Christ or without Jesus Christ. The choice is yours. If you place all of your trust in the things of man, if you place all your trust in things like this house, which was a good house, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you place all of your trust in that, what are you leaving for eternity? It's all going to be gone someday. It's things like that. This is what I mean. Everything is going to go away. Everything. We're not going to have anything. So why do we pay so much attention to it? Why do we pay attention to the cars and the houses and the clothes and everything else? Because I guess it's comforting, and the idea that we're going to live forever and all of that's going to be gone, and we have an eternal place that we're going to stay, and it's basically our choice where it's going to be, kind of that's a little overwhelming to think about. But trust me, church, it's not. Give yourself over. Give yourself in. Tell Christ, this is what you want. I don't want all this stuff, because all this stuff causes pain. I don't want pain. I don't want hurt. I want love. I want comfort. And He will give it to you. That's His promise. So church, think upon this. Set your mind upon Jesus. Put your mind on the eternal. Don't worry about this thing that's going on right now, because it too shall pass. Everything shall pass. Don't give any thought to what's going on now. Don't give any thought to these things that are happening in your life, these events. This is all going to pass. Keep walking through them. This bad call, you will get through it. The memories of something just awful that you just saw that echo, it'll pass away also one day. This is not going to be with you forever. It will all pass away. Put your mind upon Christ. Put your mind upon the eternal and rest in Him. God bless you. God keep you all. And hey, let's be careful out there.